2020 will most certainly be one for the books. What books? I'm not entirely sure. Bad books, probably, right? 2020 has been a year, and it's been a year that we will all look back on and remember as being the year of Dragon Army. So I didn't start Dragon Army books in 2020. I actually started it at the tail end of 2019, but 2020 has been the first full year of having this booktube channel. Thank you for every single one of you that have subscribed so far. Thank you for watching my videos, for liking them, for interacting in the comments, and for everything that you've done to make this channel the success that I have felt that it has been this year. Do I have more goals for the future? Absolutely, but I'm pleased with what we've been able to accomplish this year alone. And this year, more than ever before, I've read an insane amount of books. For me, for other people, I know people that have gone far more than what I have done. And then I obviously know a lot of people that have done far less. I'm somewhere probably in the middle. But for me, this is more books that I've ever read in any 365 days in years past. And so I'm pleased with that. I've enjoyed it. It hasn't been a burden. It's been something that I've enjoyed. And out of those books that I've read, the year's still not over at the recording of this video. So there might be more books that I'm adding to my read list of 2020, and there might even be some that hit my favorites. I'm not anticipating any of them stepping into the favorite, like the absolute favorites, but maybe some of them still will. But at the time of this recording, I wanted to share my 5 favorite books that I read in 2020, along with the one graphic novel that is my favorite that I read in this year. So again, these are not books that necessarily came out in 2020. They are books that I read in 2020. So without further ado, here's the first one. Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. The series is not yet complete. The final book in the series is being written and revised right now. Should be out in maybe in a year. Maybe 2021 will hold the fourth and final book in this series. But it is a series, and this was a book that took me pleasantly by surprise back in March when I was stepping into it because I had seen a few other people talk about it, an indie author debut novel, and it was kind of like this steampunk adventure. It's called Senlin Ascends. It's the Tower of Babel. Joseph Senlin and his wife, his new wife, go on their honeymoon to the Tower of Babel, this ancient construct, right, that is very mysterious. And within moments of being there, they are lost from one another. And Senlin is then spending the rest of that book and every book since trying to ascend the different ringdoms of the tower to find and locate his wife. The story is quirky, unique, fun, silly, all of those things, but the characterizations, not only of our lead characters, but all of the characters that Senlin meets along the way, along with actually what's been my favorite, the creativity and the mystery of the tower itself. Every one of the levels or ringdoms have their own quirks, their own uniqueness to them that are cute, but at the same time very devious, have like this dark underbelly. And so while the writing and the story is somewhat light and frivolous, there is a deeper, more complex story that is being told, and the characters that Senlin comes into contact with. I love how Josiah Bancroft is doing this. He introduces them early on, and they're just kind of like secondary passing characters that show up and play major roles at later parts in the story, whether it's in the first book, Senlin Ascends, or in some of the later books as well. This is a great series to read, definitely a great book to pick up. You can watch my full review at the annotation above. Senlin Ascends. Next up is a book that I read in June called The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is another debut novel. These guys and girls that are writing debut novels that are so good puts my writing to shame and makes me so excited for them because they're relatively new writers, relatively new authors, and I'm finding them early on in their career. And it's just so fun to be able to interact with them on social media and to be able to say on Twitter, for example, hey, I liked your book after reading it, and for them to write back and say, hey, thank you for reading it. That's a really cool thing that you don't get from other authors, say, such as, I don't know, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, Stephen King, right? Others like that. The Rage of Dragons, by the way, is an African-inspired epic fantasy debut that follows the lead character, Tal Solari, who is a military trainee who some terrible events happen at the beginning of the book, and then he is on a quest for vengeance, going after the people that perpetrated these crimes against him and his family. And so he gets wrapped up in that and into this greater everlasting war that's happening between his tribe and the natives of the land. There's an intricate, complex, unique magic system that is employed here. And let me tell you just a little bit about it. I don't know if I've ever really gone into detail, and I think it has spoilers, so I don't want to go too deep into there. But the magic system here has to do with going to the other world, like a demonic kind of battleground, training there, and then gaining the abilities and the strength and the battle prowess that you discover there while in the other world. But it's a complex thing and it's layered. But on top of that, so he's filled with this rage going after them. Then there's also this magic system where some people are able to call upon the power of dragons. And dragons are always cool in my book. They're ever the more epic here in this story. It's a series that is ongoing. Fires of Vengeance came out just last month, and I haven't read it yet, but plan to before the year is over. So The Rage of Dragons was my second. By the way, I'm giving these not in order of like my favorites. These are in order that they were read. So again, I'm giving you 5 books. This is in the order that I read them this year. The Rage of Dragons. Back in August of this year, I found another debut novel, a debut author, Nicholas Eames, who wrote Kings of the Wyld, which is probably one of the most unique stories that I've ever read. Sure, it borrows from some other kind of fantasy novels, but it is something entirely unique. It is as if Nicholas Eames or myself would have sat down and said, I just want to write what feels good, or I just want to write what seems incredible or awesome or epic, and screw all expectations of fantasy or expectations of what it means to be a literature or whatever. Nicholas Eames just sat down and he's like, okay, so I played some really good RPGs, like video games, and I played Dungeons and Dragons, loved them both. Let me write an epic story in that is so fun and light, but that packs a punch when it comes to the narrative that is being told. And Nicholas Eames did this and so much more. Listen to the premise. Clay Cooper and his band, Saga, were once the greatest mercenaries of all time. Once. Now they are lazy, drunk, old, fat, or some combination of all of those. But one of Clay's bandmates needs help. His daughter has gone missing, and so the band is getting back together again to go on one final mission together. And along the way, there's references to different Final Fantasy games, references to different RPG systems and Dungeons and Dragons beasts. All of the enemies that they're fighting are like the creatures from Dungeons and Dragons. You don't have to know Dungeons and Dragons to enjoy this story because the characters are rich, the world is rich. There's a whole lot of world building here. But I've never met characters as unique and full as that band that gets together. They are also different. Nicholas doesn't have to write like Clay Cooper said, or Golden Gabe said, or Moogs said, because every sentence and everything muttered from their mouths drips with characterization. It's so rich. The story is so much fun. I don't know if it works for everybody because of how fantasy it is, but for me, it was so much fun. The second book in the series is called Bloody Rose, and it is out. I believe there is going to be a third, but they are disconnected enough that you can read them all at any time. I absolutely loved Kings of the Wyld. The next book is a duh for me. It came out this year, actually. It's the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. It's his epic fantasy series, really the only epic fantasy series that I've tiptoed into. Really, I've kind of just plunged in at this point, but epic fantasy has always been intimidating to me because of how much of a commitment it is, but this one has captured my heart. It's called Rhythm of War. It only released a short time ago, but I've already read it, did a review, spoiler free, and if I haven't yet, I will be soon releasing some spoiler full review, analysis, conversation videos that I had with one of my good friends, Kenny. But this book is so good. If you haven't read Brandon Sanderson, do you even like fantasy? He is one of the greatest one of the greatest authors of all time, and is most certainly the greatest fantasy author of our time. This is the fourth book in an epic fantasy series, so how do you tell the story there? It continues the events of the previous three books, but the stakes rise, and these radiants, that is these magically imbued humans, they're not only humans at this point, but they are exploring more their powers, this war between humans and these other humanoid creatures. Singers are, it's intensifying this union between human and Spren against there's so many things here. What Brandon Sanderson does that is unique to a lot of other fantasy series is that he, more than most, explores mental issues and physical disabilities in his characters in ways that are done exceptionally well. One of our lead characters has depression, and he writes it so faithfully and doesn't just solve it with, hey, here's magic, right? He's got other characters that are missing limbs, or he's got even one that's paralyzed from the waist down, and just places them and makes them very real characters in and of themselves while exploring this so complex like magic system and world. And there's all these reveals. And for those of you that don't know, he's got this Cosmere, which he's got different series that he's written over the course of his time as an author, and they are disconnected, but they are all in the same universe, his Cosmere. And there's certain characters that have traveled back and forth, and he used to just lay out hints. Now he's gone full bore into that. You can no longer read the Stormlight Archive without knowing about the Cosmere at large. Again, I've done reviews. You can check those out in the annotations. But Rhythm of War exceeded my expectations for it this year, and my expectations were already high. The fifth book that I read and favorited this year was A Sky Beyond the Storm by Saba Tahir. I've done a full review. You can check that out in the annotation. But suffice it to say, this has been one of my favorite literary journeys to be on. I found the series in its infancy and was able to kind of walk along as each book was released and follow these characters and the author herself as she told this story. I love the prose. It is so poetic and it's functional while being so poetic and beautiful and easy and light to read. The pacing is not always the best, but the plot and the characters, she is the best at giving us real fleshed out fluent characters, and the romances and just the sheer relationships, whether it's sibling to sibling or mother to daughter or friend to friend or lover to lover. These stories and of their relationships are so real, so raw, and it's just so good. The story, again, being the last book in the series, it's a quartet. Ember in the Ashes, A Torch Against the Night, Reaper at the Gates, and A Sky Beyond the Storm. I don't know why I challenged myself with that. This is the fourth and final book, so it's hard to tell plot without giving some away, but it's kind of like what I said with Rhythm of War. Stakes continued to rise. It is an all-out war. Our three main characters, Harleen, Elias, and Laia, start on these divergent missions, but they come together for a final thrust at the end of the book, and no one's lives are safe. Either in the war or in Saba's hands. And so it's an epic series. It's got some incredible female leads. It's got a really cool realized world that is unique and different enough to not just be the standard same old. And it's got a lot of culture there that you don't get in a lot of fantasy books today. So definitely check this series out. But Sky Beyond the Storm was another conclusion to a series, and it felt so bittersweet that we're saying goodbye to these characters and this story, but was done so faithfully in such a great way. And since I am a purveyor of graphic novels, I wanted to include one that I read this year that exceeded my expectations, and that was something that was just a beautiful piece of art. And it was actually a superhero comic called Harleen. Now, it's superhero in that it's set in the world of superheroes, but that's not what it's about. It's about people. The same person that wrote it did the artwork, the illustration, the coloring, did it all. I cannot pronounce the person's name. It's something like Stejepan Sejic. That might have been right. That was my first attempt at it. I love this story. Origin stories of superheroes are overdone, admittedly so. But there's something about origin stories that works for us as humans. There's a reason why it's done so much, and it's because we like to know the beginning of the story. We want to know what brought the person to the brink of becoming the superhero that we know and love. Well, this is an origin story of Harleen, of Dr. Quinzel, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who becomes Harley Quinn, medicine woman. No, not medicine woman, just Harley Quinn. I love this for so many reasons. Harley Quinn was a character that was created in the Batman animated series that I grew up watching, that was done exceptionally well. And then she became a mainstay because fans loved her, and so she made it into all the Batman media after that. This is a story of her before getting her role, her position of doing tests on patients at the asylum. It's when she meets one of her patients who is the Joker in his early years of Jokerdom. It's her interaction with him regularly, her descent as she's trying to work on her project, but she's getting these sleepless nights, having these nightmares, and then she's finding this solace in her relationship that is being formed with her patient. It's very problematic, but it is very artfully drawn, beautifully illustrated and colored, and the story that is told is so epic. I absolutely love it. I actually wrote saying that it is my favorite superhero graphic novel or comic to date, which is a big deal, right? Because this isn't like what you typically think of when you think of superhero graphic novels. But I absolutely loved the realness of this story, and it caused me to love this character all the more. This was my top graphic novel of the year by far. One of my favorites of all time, Harleen. Those are my top 5 books plus a graphic novel that I read in 2020. Please, in the comments down below, let me know what you read. Let me know what your favorites were, and if you've read any of these and what you thought about them as well. And thank you as always for supporting the show, for watching this video, for clicking like. If you haven't, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army. There's a bell there too, and we'll see you in the next one.